They thought 4,000 miles of distance would make me blind. They believed family was a shield that could cover any sin, even turning my sanctuary into a stage for their cheap delusions. But they forgot that my job involves eliminating flaws in billion-dollar supply chains. When I watched my brother-in-law's chainsaw slice through my living room's load-bearing beam via a hidden feed, I did not cry. I simply opened a new file named Project Purge and started the countdown. My name is Deborah Weatherby, and at 34 years old, I have learned that the most dangerous threats are rarely the ones that scream. In my line of work as a strategic risk analyst for Aegis Prime Solutions, we deal in silence. We deal in the subtle shifts of supply chain logistics, the quiet movement of assets across borders, and the microscopic fractures in infrastructure that can bring down empires. I am currently stationed at a black site outpost in the Aleutian Islands of Alaska, a place where the wind howls at 60 miles per hour as a standard greeting and the sun is a rumor for half the year. The base is a study in sterile efficiency. Everything here is gray, metallic, and necessary. There is no excess. There is no comfort. That is why my home in Oak Creek, Colorado, is not just a building to me. It is my anchor. It took me 7 years of saving and 2 years of grueling, hands-on restoration to turn that Victorian revival into a sanctuary. I know every inch of that house. I know that the third floorboard from the entrance of the master bedroom creaks if you step on the left side. I know that the hand-scraped walnut floors in the living room require a specific oil blend to maintain their luster. I know the exact thread count of the vintage Persian runner in the hallway, a piece I won at an auction in Vienna. My house is the one place on this earth where I am not Lieutenant Weatherby, the logistical ghost, or Deborah, the family bank account. It is the one place where I am just myself, or at least, it was supposed to be. The alert did not come through the standard family Wi-Fi. I am not foolish enough to rely on consumer-grade security for the things I value. When I renovated the place, I hardwired a localized, independent server into the foundation, hidden behind a false panel in the basement utility room. It runs on its own encrypted cellular uplink, entirely separate from the internet service provider that sends bills to the mailbox. I call it the Watchtower. I was sitting in the mess hall, staring at a cup of lukewarm black coffee, when my wrist-mounted terminal vibrated. It was a singular, rhythmic pulse, code red. My heart rate did not spike. Discipline is a muscle, and I have trained mine to be iron. I simply stood up, walked back to my quarters, and locked the door. I sat at my desk and opened the secure link on my laptop. The screen flickered for a fraction of a second before the feed stabilized. The camera I was accessing was the size of a pinhead, embedded inside the smoke detector directly above the foyer. The angle provided a fisheye view of the entire entrance hall and part of the living room. The timestamp read 9:45 in the morning, Mountain Standard Time. My parents, Robert and Linda, were standing in the hallway. They looked nervous, shifting their weight from foot to foot. My mother was clutching her purse with both hands, her knuckles white. My father was holding the heavy brass keyring, my spare set that I had entrusted to them for emergencies only. "Are you sure about this, Bob?" my mother asked. Her voice was tinny through the microphone, but the anxiety was clear. Debbie specifically said no one comes in. She was very clear about the dust covers. "She is 4,000 miles away." "Linda," my father replied, his voice laced with that dismissive arrogance I had grown to loathe over the years. He shoved the key into the lock of the front door, struggling slightly with the mechanism. "She is sitting on a block of ice in the middle of nowhere. She is not going to know. Besides, we are family. Family helps family." My stomach tightened. It was not the trespassing that bothered me. It was the justification, the weaponization of the word family. The front door swung open. It was not just my parents. Jessica, my younger sister, breezed past them as if she owned the deed. She was followed closely by Travis, her husband, a man whose ambition was only exceeded by his incompetence. And then, the true horror set in. Behind them trailed 3 massive golden retrievers, their paws muddy from the spring thaw. their tails wagging violently against the wainscoting I had spent 3 weeks sanding by hand. I felt the air leave my lungs. I have a severe dander allergy. It is not a matter of a few sneezes. My throat closes up. My home was a hypoallergenic zone. No animals, ever. Jessica knew this. My parents knew this. "Oh, wow," Jessica said, spinning around in the center of the foyer. She dropped a heavy duffel bag directly onto the floor. I heard the distinct scratch of a metal zipper buckle dragging across the walnut finish. "It is actually bigger than I remembered. The heating bill must be insane." "Don't worry about the bills," Travis said. Stepping in, he was wearing muddy work boots. He did not wipe them. He walked straight onto the Persian runner. I watched, gripping the edge of my desk in Alaska, as a chunk of wet mud dislodged from his heel and smeared into the antique wool. "The old girl has got plenty of government money. She won't miss a few kilowatt hours." "Travis, please," my mother said, but there was no force in her voice. "We just need to be careful. We told her you were just watering the plants." "Watering the plants," Travis scoffed. He walked into the living room, out of the direct line of the foyer camera, but I switched the feed to the hidden lens in the motion sensor on the bookshelf. He was standing in the center of my living room, hands on his hips, surveying my space with a look of critical disdain. "God, look at this stuff. It looks like a funeral home in here. Who buys furniture like this anymore? It is so stiff, so old-fashioned." "It is mid-century modern and Victorian restoration. Travis," I whispered to the empty air of my Alaskan quarters, "it is worth more than your car." "We can make it work," Jessica called out from the kitchen. I switched feeds again. She was already opening my refrigerator. "We just need to modernize it a bit, make it livable. I can't believe she lives like this. It is so cold. Where are the throw pillows? Where is the life?" "We will bring our own stuff in," Travis shouted back. "Once we get the truck unloaded, we can move some of this old junk to the basement, open up the space a bit, maybe mount the 70-inch TV on that wall where that weird painting is." That weird painting was an original landscape by a local Colorado artist from the 1920s. My father walked into the frame in the living room. "Now, listen," he said, lowering his voice, though the high-gain audio picked it up perfectly. "You guys need to be smart. If she calls, you are not here. You are watching the house. That is the story. We told her Jessica is just checking on the pipes because of the freeze warning." "Checking on the pipes?" Jessica laughed. Walking back into the living room with a bottle of my imported sparkling water, she cracked it open. "Dad, come on. She's going to be gone for 6 months. By the time she gets back, we will have found a new place, or maybe she will let us stay. She has plenty of room. It is selfish for one person to have 5 bedrooms anyway." "5 bedrooms," I muttered. "One is a library, one is a gym, one is an office, one is a guest room for actual guests." I watched as Travis flopped onto my velvet sofa. The dust cover had been ripped off and balled up in the corner. One of the dogs jumped up beside him, drooling onto the upholstery. Travis scratched the dog's ears, sending a cloud of fur into the air. "This is going to be sweet," Travis said, kicking his feet up onto the coffee table. My coffee table. Finally, some breathing room. That apartment was suffocating me. A man can't think in a shoebox. Here I can really launch the business. I minimized the video window and brought up the security logs. I needed to know the extent of the infection. My eyes scanned the data, and the cold fury in my chest solidified into ice. The logs showed the front door had first been accessed 3 days ago. 3 days. I checked the timestamp of my last video call with my mother. It was yesterday evening. I pulled up the archived footage of that call. I watched my mother's face on the screen, smiling that sweet maternal smile. "Everything is fine here. Honey," she had said, "the house is safe. Dad went over and checked the thermostat just this morning. Not a soul around. Quiet as a mouse." She had looked me in the eye, across 4,000 miles of digital signal, and lied without blinking. While she was saying those words, Jessica was likely already unpacking her clothes in my master bedroom. While my father was nodding in the background of the call, Travis was likely shedding mud onto my floors. They had not just broken into my house, they had broken the fundamental contract of our relationship. They assumed I was a resource, not a person. They assumed my boundaries were suggestions, not laws. They assumed that because I was family, I would absorb the disrespect, clean up the mess, and pay the bills. I looked back at the live feed. Jessica was now letting the other two dogs run up the stairs. My hardwood stairs that scratched if you looked at them wrong. Travis was taking a picture of the living room, presumably to post on social media to brag about his new digs. My hand hovered over the phone. The instinct was to call, to scream, to unleash the full force of my vocabulary and my rage upon them. I wanted to see the color drain from their faces. I wanted to hear them stutter. But then I looked at Travis. I saw the way he looked at the wall, tapping it, measuring it with his eyes. I saw the entitlement radiating off Jessica. I saw the complicity of my parents. If I screamed now, they would retreat. They would apologize. They would say it was a misunderstanding. They would move out, leaving behind scratches and dander. And in a year, they would try something else. They would play the victim. They would say I was hysterical. No, screaming is for people who have no power. I had all the power. They just did not know it yet. I needed to see how far they would go. I needed to let them dig the hole deep enough that they could not climb back out. I needed to document every scratch, every lie, every stolen kilowatt of electricity. I closed the video feed, but kept the recording running. I opened my encrypted contact list. I did not dial my parents. I scrolled past their names. I stopped at a name I had not called in 2 years. Marcus. Marcus was a former counterintelligence officer I had worked with in Syria. He had been discharged for being too aggressive with his methods. But he was the best investigator I had ever known. He was now running a private consultancy in Denver, less than 2 hours from Oak Creek. I hit the call button. It rang twice. "Weatherby," his voice rasped. "I thought you were freezing to death in the Arctic." "Alaska," I corrected, my voice steady, devoid of the tremors that were racking my insides. "And I need eyes on a target." "What kind of target?" "Domestic," I said. "Hostile occupation. 4 subjects, 3 canines. Location is my primary residence in Oak Creek." There was a pause on the other end. Marcus knew how much I loved that house. "Who are they?" "Family," I said. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. "Understood," Marcus said, his tone shifting instantly from casual to professional. "What are the rules of engagement?" "Total surveillance," I commanded. "I want financials. I want background checks on their current employment status. I want to know what they are buying, what they are selling, and who they are talking to. If they sneeze, I want to know the velocity. And Marcus?" "Yeah?" "They think the house is theirs," I said, watching the frozen frame of Travis's boots on my Persian rug. "Let them believe it. Do not interfere. Just watch. And record everything." "You are planning something," Marcus said. It was not a question. "I am initiating a purge," I said. "I want a daily report by 0800 hours. Don't miss anything." "Copy that. I am on the way." I disconnected the call. I turned back to the window of my quarters. Outside, the blizzard was picking up, a wall of white erasing the world. It was cold, brutal, and unforgiving. Exactly the atmosphere I needed. My parents thought they had pulled a fast one. They thought the distance made me weak. They were about to learn that for a logistician, distance is just another variable to be calculated, managed, and eventually eliminated. They had crossed the line. Now, I was going to redraw it, and this time, I would carve it in stone. The file from Marcus arrived on my secure server exactly 48 hours after I authorized the surveillance. It was not a simple text update. It was a comprehensive digital dossier labeled Target Assessment, Parasitic Activity. I opened it at 2 a.m. Alaska time, the wind battering the reinforced walls of my quarters like a physical assault. But the storm outside was nothing compared to the cold. calculated devastation unraveling on my screen. The first revelation was financial. Marcus had pulled the public records and cross-referenced them with a recent listing on a local rental platform. Jessica and Travis had not given up their lease or sold their cramped two-bedroom condo in Denver. Instead, they had listed it for rent at $2,500 a month. They had found a tenant almost immediately. The math was sickeningly simple. They were living in my home, a property that costs me over $4,000 a month in mortgage, taxes, and insurance, completely rent-free. Meanwhile, they were pocketing the income from their own property. They were not just saving money, they were profiting from my displacement. My home had become their investment vehicle. I sat there, staring at the lease agreement Marcus had somehow obtained, and realized I was no longer a sister or a daughter. I was a host organism, but that was just the prologue. The true motive for their invasion was listed under the section Marcus had titled Commercial Activity. Travis was not just unemployed and looking for direction. He had joined a multi-level marketing scheme called Apex Vitality, selling dubious nutritional supplements and brain-enhancing powders. The problem was not just the pyramid scheme itself, it was how he was legitimizing it. I clicked on a link to his new business website. There, in bold letters under the Regional Headquarters tab, was my address. He was using the prestige of Oak Creek, a neighborhood known for its historic estates and affluent residents, to give his scam a veneer of respectability. He had registered his LLC using my home as the physical office. I switched to the interior camera feeds to see how this business was manifesting physically. What I saw made my hands tremble. My living room, once a study in Victorian elegance, looked like a convention center booth. Travis had decided that my hand-painted wallpaper, a subtle, damask pattern I had imported from France, was the perfect backdrop for his marketing materials. He had not used adhesive strips. He had taken a power drill to the lath and plaster walls. I watched a recorded clip from earlier that day. The sound of the drill was a high-pitched scream in the empty house. Travis drove 4 heavy-duty anchors into the wall above the fireplace. Oblivious to the fact that he was drilling into original 1910 masonry, he hung a massive vinyl banner that read, Apex Vitality, Unleash the Alpha. To make room for this monstrosity, he had removed my art. Specifically, he had taken down a collection of charcoal sketches by a renowned local artist, framed in museum-quality glass. I watched him stack them carelessly, glass against glass, and haul them toward the basement door. The basement in my house is unfinished. It is climate-controlled to a degree, but it is still a basement. It is damp. It is dusty. It is where you put old paint cans, not fine art. I watched him dump the frames next to the sump pump, one of them sliding down and cracking against the concrete floor. He did not even look back. To him, my curated sanctuary was just clutter standing in the way of his hustle. Then came the neighbors. My security system picked up an interaction on the front porch camera. It was Mr. Henderson from next door, a retired judge who valued peace above all else. He looked agitated. "Robert," Mr. Henderson said to my father, who had answered the door, "we need to talk about the noise and the commercial deliveries. There have been delivery trucks blocking the driveway all morning. This is a residential zone." My father, the man who taught me to always take responsibility for my actions, smiled a plastic, conciliatory smile. "I am so sorry. George, you know how young people are. They are just setting up a little project." Deborah gave them the go-ahead. Of course, she wanted the house to be used while she was away. She said it was too quiet. I froze. Deborah approved this? Mr. Henderson looked skeptical. "That does not sound like her. She barely lets anyone park on the street." "Oh, absolutely," my father lied, his voice smooth and practiced. "She is trying to be more supportive of her sister's ventures. We are just here to facilitate. I will tell Travis to keep it down. But you know, Deborah insisted they feel at home." He was using my name as a shield. He was spending my social capital, ruining the reputation I had built in that neighborhood for 5 years, just to cover for Travis's incompetence. By stating that I approved it, he made me the villain in my neighbor's eyes. I was no longer the respectful, quiet professional. I was the inconsiderate owner allowing a circus to run town. I logged the timestamp of that conversation. It went into the folder named Complicity, but the insults to my property were escalating from aesthetic to structural. I had received a notification from the utility company 2 days prior about unusual usage, but I had assumed it was just the heating system working overtime for the new occupants. I was wrong. I accessed the smart meter data. My daily electricity consumption had jumped by 500%. It was consuming the power equivalent of a small industrial factory. I searched the house via the cameras to find the source. I found it in the guest bedroom, the one with the south-facing windows and the delicate silk drapes. Travis had set up a server farm. There were 6 high-powered computer rigs on a metal rack, their fans whirring at a deafening volume, generating enough heat to warp the floorboards. He was mining cryptocurrency. He was using my electricity, which I paid for via autopay, to generate digital coins for his private wallet. He was literally burning my money to mint his own. The extension cords were daisy-chained in a way that was a clear fire hazard, snaking across the room and plugged into every available outlet. He was running a high-load operation on residential wiring. If the heat did not ruin the room, a short circuit would burn the house down. I was calculating the cost per kilowatt hour when something on the exterior feed caught my eye. Something was wrong with the light in the kitchen. It was too bright. The shadows were wrong. I switched to the external perimeter camera, the one mounted on the garage looking back at the house. My breath hitched. A physical pain shot through my chest. Sharper than any knife, the great oak was gone. It was a 50-year-old white oak tree that stood in the backyard. Its branches had shaded the kitchen and the patio for decades. It was the centerpiece of the garden, a majestic, living thing that I had paid an arborist thousands of dollars to prune and maintain just last year. Now, only a jagged, raw stump remained. Sawdust covered my manicured lawn like a fresh wound. I frantically scrubbed the video timeline back to find the moment of execution. I found it at 10 in the morning on Tuesday. Travis, wearing sunglasses and holding a rented chainsaw, was hacking away at the trunk. He did not know how to fell a tree properly. He just butchered it. I turned on the audio for that clip. Jessica was standing on the patio, holding her phone up, filming him. "Why are we doing this again, babe?" she asked, shouting over the roar of the engine. "The lighting is terrible for my live streams," Travis yelled back, pausing to wipe sweat from his forehead. "That damn tree blocks all the natural light in the kitchen between 10 and 2. That is prime posting time. Plus, it drops leaves everywhere. It is a nuisance." "Deborah is going to kill you," Jessica giggled, but she did not stop him. "She won't even notice," Travis said, revving the saw again. "I will tell her it had rot, or that a storm took it down. Besides, it opens up the view, increases property value." He drove the saw back into the wood. I watched the tree fall. It crashed onto my hydrangeas, crushing them instantly. I closed my eyes. I did not cry. Crying implies sadness. I was past sadness. I was in a state of cold, reptilian focus. He had killed a 50-year-old living thing because it messed with the lighting of his video sales pitch for protein powder. My phone buzzed. It was a text message from Jessica. "Hey sis, hope Alaska isn't too cold." Hey, weird question, but Travis has some important paperwork to do for his new job. "Is it okay if we use the study for a bit? We won't touch anything. Just need a quiet desk. Love you." The timestamp on the text was 11:15 at night. I looked at the security feed for my office. The door was made of solid mahogany, locked with a biometric deadbolt that only accepted my fingerprint or a physical override key that I kept in a safe deposit box. The feed showed the door was already open. I rewound 2 hours. Travis had not waited for permission. He had taken a flathead screwdriver and a hammer to the door frame. I watched him pry at the wood, splintering the casing, gouging deep marks into the mahogany. When that did not work, he had simply kicked it. He kicked my office door until the wood around the strike plate shattered. He walked in, sat down in my Aeron chair, and put his feet up on my desk, the desk my grandfather had carved. He spun around, laughing, and beckoned Jessica in. "See?" he said on the recording. "Told you I would get in. It is just a door. Jess, it is just stuff." Jessica walked in and sat on the edge of the desk. "I will text her anyway," she said, pulling out her phone. "Just to keep up appearances. If she says yes, then we didn't break in, right? We just expedited the process." She sent the text. I watched her thumb hit the screen on the video feed at the exact moment my phone buzzed in reality. The audacity was breathtaking. They were asking for permission to enter a room they had already burglarized. I did not reply to the text. I did not call. I did not scream. Instead, I opened a new subfolder in the Project Purge drive. I titled it Criminal Damages. I began to catalog everything. Item 1. Income tax fraud via undeclared rental income, Jessica and Travis. Item 2. Commercial zoning violation, Apex Vitality LLC. Item 3. Destruction of property, lath and plaster walls. Item 4. Theft of services, electricity for crypto mining. Item 5. Environmental damage and unauthorized tree removal. Item 6. Breaking and entering, the office. I downloaded the videos. I clipped the audio files. I saved the screenshots of Travis's website and the rental listing for their condo. I was building a coffin for their lives. Nail by nail, file by file. They thought they were living in a free house. They did not realize that the meter was running. And the currency I accepted was not dollars. It was total, absolute ruin. I picked up my satellite phone and dialed Marcus again. "The report was received," I said, my voice devoid of any inflection. "I saw the tree," Marcus said quietly. "Debbie, I am sorry. That was a beautiful tree." "Do not be sorry," I replied. "Be thorough. I want the name of the creditors Travis owes money to. I want to know who holds the note on their condo. And Marcus?" "Yeah?" "Get a structural engineer on standby. If he drilled into the fireplace wall, he might have hit the chimney flue, and if he takes that saw to anything else, I want to know before the sawdust hits the floor." "You are going to let them keep going?" "I am," I said, looking at the image of Travis sleeping in my office chair, drool pooling on my leather blotter. "They have only destroyed my property so far. I need them to destroy themselves, and for that, I need to give them enough rope." I hung up. I looked at the text message from Jessica again. "Is it okay if we use the study?" I typed a reply, my fingers moving calmly over the keys. "Sure. Just make sure you leave everything exactly as you found it." I hit send. Let them think they had won. Let them feel comfortable. The fall is always deadlier when you don't see the ground coming. The ritual of the weekly video call had become a fascinating study in frantic stage management. I sat at my desk in the command center of the Alaskan base, my face illuminated by the cold blue light of 3 monitors. On the center screen, I had the official FaceTime application open, waiting to connect. On the left screen, however, I had the real-time feed from the kitchen security camera. It was 6 p.m. in Colorado. I hit the call button. On the left screen, panic erupted. "She is calling! She is calling!" my mother shrieked, dropping a half-eaten slice of pizza onto the granite countertop. She frantically wiped the grease with a dish towel, my decorative linen dish towel that was strictly for display. "Jessica, get those boxes out of the frame," my father barked. He was shoving a pile of Travis's unsold nutritional supplements into the pantry with his foot. Jessica was sitting at the kitchen island, filing her nails. "Relax, Dad. Just angle the camera up. She does not need to see the floor." "Just hide the dog food," my mother yelled, kicking a 50-pound bag of kibble behind the island. They scrambled like roaches caught in a sudden beam of light. It took them 45 seconds to curate the illusion of normalcy. On the 46th second, the call connected on my center screen. My mother's face appeared, framed perfectly against the backsplash. She was smiling, breathless, her cheeks flushed. My father leaned in over her shoulder, beaming with a benevolence that made my skin crawl. "Debbie," my mother chirped. Oh, it is so good to see you, sweetie. We were just sitting here having a quiet tea. How is the frozen north? It is cold. Mother, I said, keeping my voice flat, is everything okay at the house? You look flushed. Oh, just hot flashes. She laughed nervously. You know how it is. But the house? The house is perfect. Just perfect. Your father and I have been keeping everything exactly how you like it. We even dusted the baseboards today. I glanced at the left monitor. Behind the island, unseen by the phone camera, one of the golden retrievers was currently licking the pizza grease my mother had failed to clean up. I appreciate that, I lied. I know it is a burden. It is never a burden for family, my father said, his voice dropping into that serious, paternal register he used when he was about to ask for something. Actually, speaking of the house, honey, we noticed a few things, small things, but you know how old houses are. Here it comes, I thought. The roof, my father sighed. There is a leak in the guest wing, and the boiler is making a funny noise. I had a guy look at it. Just a friend, off the books, and he said it needs some urgent maintenance before it blows. We did not want to bother you with the details, but it is going to cost a bit. I leaned back in my chair. The roof had been replaced 3 years ago with 50-year architectural shingles. The boiler was a state-of-the-art German system installed last summer. Still under warranty. There was no leak. There was no noise. How much? I asked. My parents exchanged a quick look. I saw it on both screens, a look of conspiratorial greed. About $2,500, my father said. That covers parts and labor. We would pay it ourselves, obviously. But things are a little tight this month with everything. Send it to me, I said. I will transfer the money to your account right now. You are a lifesaver, Debbie, my mother said, her relief palpable. We just want to protect your investment. I know you do, I said. I have to go. Duty calls. I hung up. I did not send $2,500. I sent $3,000. I wanted them to feel flushed. I wanted them to feel like they had won the lottery. However, the transfer was not a standard wire. I used a banking tracer protocol that I had access to through my clearance level, ostensibly for tracking vendor fraud, but effective for personal accounts if you know the routing numbers. I watched the money hit my father's account. It stayed there for exactly 12 minutes. Then, 80% of it was transferred to a third-party digital wallet. I ran the wallet address through a database. It was not a plumber. It was not a roofing contractor. It was a holding account for an offshore sports betting platform, specifically one that dealt in high-risk parlays on illegal fighting rings. The remaining 20% went to a liquor store transaction and a payment to Apex Vitality Inventory Restock. I sat in the silence of my office. The hum of the servers the only sound. It was not a surprise. It was a confirmation. For 34 years, this had been the dynamic. I was the infrastructure. Jessica was the art project. I was the one who studied late, worked 2 jobs through college, and joined the military to pay for my master's degree. Jessica was the one who needed to find herself, a journey that apparently required my parents to fund 3 different failed degrees and a series of disastrous relationships. I was the ATM, she was the princess, and my parents were the tellers, constantly facilitating the withdrawal of my resources to fund her failures. They did not love us equally. They loved her neediness because it gave them purpose. They loved my success only because it gave them currency. But the gambling debt was just the appetizer. The main course was served 2 days later. It was Friday night. My security system alerted me to multiple vehicles entering the driveway. I pulled up the exterior cameras. It looked like a valet line at a country club. Luxury sedans and high-end SUVs were parking on my lawn. Not on the driveway. On the Kentucky bluegrass, I spent 4 figures aerating and seeding every autumn. Travis was hosting a party. But it was not just a social gathering. It was an Apex Vitality launch gala. I switched to the living room feed. My stomach turned over. There were at least 40 people in my house. They were strangers, and they were all wearing shoes. Not just shoes, stiletto heels. I watched a woman in red-bottomed pumps pivot sharply on her heel to grab a glass of cheap champagne. I could practically hear the finish on the American black walnut floors scream as the wood fibers were crushed. Travis was standing by the fireplace. Under his hideous vinyl banner, he was wearing a suit that was too shiny and a tie that was too wide. He held a microphone, looking like a televangelist selling salvation in a bottle. "Welcome to my home," he boomed, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. I know. It is a humble little shack." Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. "But seriously," Travis continued, gesturing grandly with a glass of scotch. My 20-year-old single malt scotch that I had been saving for my retirement. "When I bought this place, I told my wife, 'Baby, we need space to dream,' and that is what Apex Vitality is about. Dreaming big, investing in yourself. I bought this house with the returns from my first year in the program, smart investments, crypto, supplements, the holy trinity of wealth." He was lying to a room full of potential victims, using my property as the proof of his success. He was claiming ownership of my blood, sweat, and mortgage payments. My parents were there, circulating through the crowd. I watched my father nod solemnly as a guest complimented the architecture. "Yes, we are very proud of him," I heard my father say on the audio feed. "Travis has a real head for business. He has really turned this place around." I felt a vein in my temple throb. They were erasing me. In their narrative, I did not exist. I was just a ghost who paid the taxes. But then, the night took a turn that shifted my emotion from rage to icy. Predatory calculation. The crowd was thinning out. A small group of men remained near the fireplace. They were older, in their 60s, wearing hats with military insignias, Vietnam vets, Gulf War vets, the kind of men who respected the uniform because they knew the weight of it. Travis was trying to close them on a bulk order of joint relief supplements. "I know what it is like," Travis said, his voice dropping to a somber, respectful tone. "The aches, the pains, the things you carry back from the desert." One of the men looked at him. "You served, son?" Travis hesitated, just for a second, then he nodded. "Special logistics, classified mostly, but yeah, I did my time." My hands clenched into fists so tight my fingernails cut into my palms. Travis had asthma. The closest he had ever been to combat was playing Call of Duty on his Xbox. "Is that right?" the veteran asked, looking interested. "Which unit?" "Forward Operating Base Delta." Travis improvised poorly. "But hey, let me show you something. I don't usually bring these out. Too many memories." He walked over to the built-in cabinets in the corner, the cabinets I had locked. He pulled a key from his pocket. He must have found the spare I hid in the false bottom of the kitchen drawer, and opened the glass display case. Inside was my dress uniform, my dress blues. It hung there perfectly pressed, the gold buttons gleaming. Pinned to the chest were my ribbons, the Meritorious Service Medal, the Commendation Medal, the ribbons for tours in places that do not officially exist on the news. Travis took the jacket off the hanger. "No," I whispered to the empty room in Alaska. "Do not do it. Do not touch it." He put it on. It was too small for him in the shoulders and too loose in the waist. He looked like a child playing dress-up. He did not button it because he could not. He stood there, wearing my service, my history, my honor, like a costume for a sales pitch. "Lieutenant Commander?" Travis said, pointing to the rank insignia on the shoulder. My rank. "They wanted me to stay in, said I was on the fast track to Admiral. But I had to come home. Family first, right?" "Impressive," the veteran said, nodding with genuine respect. "Thank you for your service, son." "And that is why I want to give you guys a discount," Travis said, smoothing the fabric of my jacket with his sweaty hands. "Veterans discount, 50% off the starter kit, because I know what you have been through." The men began reaching for their wallets. They were opening their checkbooks, trusting a brother in arms, unaware they were writing checks to a fraud who was wearing a woman's uniform jacket over a cheap polyester shirt. I froze the video feed. I captured the frame, Travis standing there, grinning, wearing my medals, selling snake oil to old soldiers. A cold calm washed over me. It was absolute. It was final. Up until this moment, they were just bad tenants. They were just ungrateful family members. I could sue them for damages. Sure, I could evict them. But this was a violation of federal law. Under the Stolen Valor Act of 2013. It is a federal crime to fraudulently portray oneself as a recipient of certain military decorations or medals with the intent to obtain money, property, or other tangible benefits. Travis had just done exactly that, on camera, in high-definition audio and video, with witnesses. He had just turned a civil dispute into a criminal case. And my parents? I rewound the footage 10 seconds. My mother was standing right there. She watched him put on the jacket. She watched him lie to those men. She did not stop him. She smiled. She was holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres, enabling the fraud, complicit in the desecration of the only thing in my life that belonged solely to me. I picked up the phone. I did not call Marcus. I called a different number. I called the legal department at Aegis Prime. I needed to consult with a specialist in military law, not for defense, but for prosecution. Make the call, I whispered to myself as I saved the video file to 3 different cloud servers. Enjoy the party, Travis, because the hangover is going to last 5 to 10 years. I looked at his face on the screen one last time. He looked so proud of himself. He thought he was a king. He was just a dead man walking. 72 hours after I watched Travis desecrate my uniform, I vanished from the face of the earth. Technically, I was on compassionate leave. I had walked into my commanding officer's office and placed a single sheet of paper on his desk. It was a standard request form, citing an urgent family emergency involving severe financial and legal distress. My CO, a man who understood that wars were not always fought with rifles, signed it without asking a single question. He simply looked at the vein throbbing in my forehead and told me to go handle my business. I did not fly directly to Oak Creek. That would have been tactical suicide. If my parents or Jessica saw my rental car in the driveway, they would immediately switch to defensive mode. They would cry, they would gaslight, and they would play the victim before I could secure the perimeter. No, I needed to be a ghost. I flew into Denver International Airport at 2 a.m, wearing civilian clothes and a baseball cap pulled low. I rented a nondescript gray sedan using a secondary credit card that was not linked to any joint accounts my parents might have snooped on. I drove to a corporate housing complex in Broomfield, about 45 minutes away from my house. It was close enough to strike, but far enough to remain invisible. I set up my command post on the dining table of the furnished apartment. Laptop, satellite uplink, burner phones, at 8 a.m. I walked into the office of Evelyn Sterling. Evelyn was a shark in a silk blouse. We had met 5 years ago during a contract dispute involving a defense supplier, and I knew her to be the most ruthless property and fraud attorney in the state. She did not bill by the hour. She billed by the amount of blood she extracted from the opposing counsel. I sat in her glass-walled conference room and laid out the dossier. "You have been busy, Deborah," Evelyn said, sliding her reading glasses down her nose as she scanned the printouts of the Stolen Valor incident and the illegal business registration. "This is already enough to bury them in civil litigation for a decade. But you said on the phone there was something new." "I got a notification from the county clerk's automated system yesterday," I said, my voice steady. "A permit application was filed for structural modification at my address. It was approved 2 days ago." Evelyn tapped her manicured fingernails on the mahogany table. "And I assume you did not sign it?" "I was in the Aleutian Islands," I replied. "I have not signed a physical document in 6 months." Evelyn pulled up the digitized permit on her tablet. She zoomed in on the signature line. There, in shaky black ink, was a scrawl that looked vaguely like my name. It was a clumsy forgery, likely traced from an old birthday card or a check I had written years ago. "This is Travis," Evelyn said, recognizing the handwriting from the other documents I had provided. "He is petitioning to remove a load-bearing partition between the living room and the dining room. He wants an open concept floor plan. He wants to destroy the structural integrity of a 100-year-old house, I corrected. But that is not the worst part. Look at the financing section. Evelyn swiped to the next page. Her eyes narrowed. Lender of record BlackRock Capital Ventures. It is a hard money lender, I said. Predatory, high risk. They do not care about credit scores. They care about collateral. They lend based on the asset value. To get a loan like this, Evelyn said slowly, looking up at me, he would need the deed, the original deed. Do you have it? I felt a cold stone settle in my stomach. It was in a floor safe in the master bedroom closet. The combination was my grandmother's birthday. My mother knows that date. The silence in the room was heavy. It was the silence of a final, irrevocable betrayal. My parents had not just let my sister stay in my house. They had broken into my safe, stolen the title to my property, and handed it to a con artist so he could mortgage my future to fund a pyramid scheme. The loan amount is $150,000. Evelyn read, interest rate is 18%. If he defaults, they foreclose in 30 days. He will default, I said. He is using the money to buy inventory for a business that does not exist. We can stop the disbursement, Evelyn said, reaching for her phone. I can file an emergency injunction right now. We can prove the deed was stolen. We can freeze the funds before they hit his account. No, I said. Evelyn paused, her hand hovering over the receiver. Excuse me? If we stop it now, I said, leaning forward. It is just attempted fraud. It is a family dispute. My parents will say they borrowed the deed and meant to put it back. Travis will say he thought he had verbal permission. It becomes a he said, she said mess. I looked Evelyn in the eye. I need the crime to be completed. I need the money to hit their account. I need them to spend it. Once that money is spent, it is grand larceny. It is mortgage fraud. It is wire fraud. It is a federal felony with a mandatory minimum sentence. Evelyn smiled. A sharp, dangerous smile. You are cold, Deborah. I am a risk analyst, I replied. I am managing the liability. We let the loan proceed. I watched the transaction alert hit my phone 3 hours later. $150,000, deposited into a joint account held by Jessica and Travis. The trap was set. Now I needed to assess the damage. I could not go to the house myself, so I hired a proxy. I contacted a structural engineer named David Thorne, a man I had used for the initial restoration. I told him I was out of town but was worried about some unauthorized renovations and needed an emergency inspection. I told him to say the insurance company sent him for a random audit. I sat in my rental apartment, watching the security feed as David knocked on my front door. Travis answered, looking annoyed. He was wearing a tank top, covered in drywall dust. Insurance audit, David said, flashing a clipboard. Routine check. Won't take 10 minutes. Travis tried to block the door. We did not call for an audit. The owner is not home. That is why we are here, David lied smoothly. Policy requirement for unoccupied dwellings. If I do not inspect, we drop the coverage effective at midnight. Travis, terrified of losing the safety net for his mansion, stepped aside. I watched David walk through my house. I saw him wince as he looked at the holes drilled into the plaster. I saw him shake his head at the scratches on the floor. But when he got to the living room, he stopped dead in his tracks. Travis had not waited for the permit to be processed. He had already started cutting. A massive hole had been smashed into the wall, separating the living room from the dining room. The lath was exposed like broken ribs, and right in the center, a 6x6 solid oak support post, the main spinal column of the first floor, had been sawed halfway through. I saw David pull out his phone and dial my number. Deborah, he said, his voice tight with professional panic. Are you seeing this? I am watching on the feed. David, I said. Get them out, he said. Right now, he has compromised the load path. If we get a heavy snow load, and the forecast says we have 6 inches coming tonight. That ceiling is coming down. The sheer strength is gone. The house is a death trap." My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to destroy them. Yes, but I did not want to kill them. Not physically. "Can you stabilize it?" I asked. "I can put up temporary shoring jacks," David said, "but I need to do it now. And I need to tell this idiot to stop vibrating the floor with whatever heavy equipment he's running in the basement." "Do it," I said. "Tell him the insurance company mandates immediate shoring or the policy is void. Scare him. Make him believe the house is about to implode." I watched as David turned to Travis. I could not hear the exact words, but I saw Travis's face go pale. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by the cowardice of a man who realizes he has played with forces he does not understand. David went out to his truck and brought in heavy steel jacks. He cranked them into place under the wounded beam, the metal groaning as it took the weight of the second floor. The house was safe, for the moment, but the timeline had shifted. I could not wait weeks. I had to accelerate the endgame. I sat back at my table in the safe house and opened a new document. It was time for psychological warfare. If they liked playing with fake documents, I would give them a masterclass. I drafted a letter on the letterhead of a fictitious specialized asset recovery firm. The logo looked official, terrifyingly corporate. Notice of intent to seize. The header read in bold, red letters. The text was a masterpiece of legal gibberish and imminent threat. It stated that due to irregularities in the collateral assessment, referring to the fraudulent loan they had just taken, the lender was initiating an immediate review of the property assets. It demanded a full inventory of all high-value items in the home by Friday at 5 p.m. I printed it out. I put it in a priority mail envelope. I drove to a post office 3 towns over to mail it, ensuring the postmark would not give away my location. But I did not stop there. I accessed the smart home system again. Travis was currently in the living room, staring at the steel jacks holding up the ceiling, looking like a cornered rat. Jessica was on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, blissfully unaware of the structural precipice they were living on. I waited until midnight. I remotely accessed the thermostat. I dropped the temperature to 55 degrees. Then, I accessed the lighting system. I programmed a random flicker sequence. Subtle at first. Just a dimming of the hallway lights every 30 minutes. Then a sudden flash in the kitchen. I wanted them to feel the house rejecting them. I wanted them to feel like the walls were closing in. The next morning, the letter arrived. I watched on the foyer camera as Travis ripped open the envelope. I saw his eyes scan the page. I saw his hands start to shake. "Jess!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Jess, come here." Jessica ran into the room. "What? What is it?" "The bank," Travis stammered, holding up the fake notice. They know about the loan. They are talking about seizing assets." "What assets?" Jessica asked, snatching the paper. "This isn't our house, Travis. They can't seize Deborah's house for your loan." "They can if the deed is the collateral," Travis yelled. "If they find out I am not the owner, it is fraud. Jess, I signed as the owner." "You told me you fixed that," Jessica shrieked. "You told me Mom and Dad said it was okay." "It is okay," Travis lied, pacing in circles on the Persian rug. "I just need time. I need to sell the inventory. I need to flip the crypto. I just need a week." "We don't have a week," Jessica yelled, waving the letter. "It says Friday. That is tomorrow." I sat in my apartment, sipping cold coffee, watching the panic set in. It was a beautiful thing. The rats were turning on each other. The pressure was building, but I was not done. I picked up my burner phone and sent a text message to my father. "Hi, Dad. Just checking in. I had a weird dream that something was wrong with the house. Is everything okay? Is the structure sound?" I watched the feed as my father's phone buzzed in his pocket. He was in the kitchen, making a sandwich, oblivious to the drama in the foyer. He looked at the text. He paled. He walked into the living room, saw the steel jacks holding up the ceiling. saw Travis hyperventilating, and saw Jessica crying. "She knows," my father whispered, looking at the ceiling as if I were God watching from above. "Somehow, she knows." He was right. I did know. And I was coming for them. I closed the laptop. I had a meeting with the sheriff in the morning. It was time to turn this ghost story into a true crime documentary. The transition from digital surveillance to physical proximity shifted the gravity of the operation. I was no longer sitting in a corporate apartment 45 minutes away. I was parked in a nondescript, black utility van exactly 2 streets over from my house in Oak Creek, flanked by a thermos of black coffee and a rack of high-fidelity audio receivers. I could see the chimney of my home rising above the tree line, but more importantly, I could hear the sound of a family imploding in high definition. The chaos began with a notification I had orchestrated 12 hours prior. Through my contacts in the financial compliance sector, I had flagged the sudden influx of the $150,000 loan into Travis and Jessica's joint account as suspicious activity indicative of layering and integration, which are the hallmarks of money laundering. It was an aggressive move, but technically accurate given the fraudulent origin of the funds. At 9:15 in the morning, Travis tried to transfer funds to a crypto exchange. I watched on the monitor inside the van. Travis was sitting at the kitchen island, furiously tapping his phone. His face went from annoyed to confused, and then to a sickly shade of gray. "Access denied," he muttered. He tried again. "Contact institution for verification." He dialed the bank immediately, putting it on speakerphone so he could keep typing. I listened to the hold music, followed by the crisp voice of a fraud prevention officer. "Mr. Miller," the voice said, "your accounts have been frozen pending a federal investigation into the source of recent deposits. We have received a flag regarding potential illicit origin. You will not be able to withdraw or transfer any assets until the investigation is concluded. This can take up to 90 days. 90 days? Travis shrieked, standing up so fast his chair tipped over. "You can't do that. That is my money. I have business expenses. I have payroll." "He does not have payroll," I whispered to the dashboard of the van. "He does not even have a business license." "I am sorry, sir," the agent replied. "This is a federal compliance issue. Good day." The line went dead. Travis stood there, the phone slipping from his sweaty grip. He was not just broke. He was paralyzed. The $150,000, the blood money he had mortgaged my house for, was sitting behind a pane of digital glass, completely untouchable. Then, the second shoe dropped. His personal cell phone rang. It was not a number stored in his contacts. It was a burner number. Travis hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" "Travis," a voice rasped. It was deep, distorted, and utterly devoid of patience. "My associates tell me the first installment is due at noon. We have not received the transfer." This was the hard money lender. The BlackRock Capital name on the loan documents was just a shell for a localized syndicate that lent money at usurious rates to desperate people. They did not report to credit bureaus. They reported to kneecaps. "Yeah, hey, listen," Travis stammered, wiping sweat from his upper lip. "There is a little glitch with the bank. Just a technical thing. Federal compliance. You know? Big government overreach. I will have it to you by tomorrow. Or Monday. Definitely Monday. Noon today. Travis," the voice said. "Or we send a collection team to the asset. And we are not talking about the house." The call ended. Travis looked around the kitchen like a trapped animal. He needed $5,000 in cash, immediately, just to cover the interest payment and keep his legs intact. He did not have $5. He ran into the living room. Jessica was still asleep upstairs. He grabbed a crowbar from his toolbox. "She has money," he muttered to himself, his eyes darting around the room. "She is a government spook. They always have cash, emergency funds, hidden in the walls, under the floors." It was a delusion born of pure panic. He convinced himself that because I was private about my life, I must be hiding stacks of currency in the structure of the house itself. He approached the wainscoting in the hallway, original oak paneling installed in 1910. "Show me the money," he hissed, and drove the crowbar into the wood. The sound of the wood splintering was physically painful to hear through my headphones. He ripped a 4-foot section of paneling off the wall, exposing the plaster and lath behind it. Nothing fell out but century-old dust. "Where is it?" he screamed, swinging the crowbar again. He smashed a hole in the plaster. "Where is the stash?" The front door opened. My parents, Robert and Linda, walked in. They were carrying grocery bags, likely bought with the last of their pension money, because Jessica had told them the business was having cash flow issues. They stopped. They saw the steel shoring jacks holding up the ceiling. They saw the hole in the dining room wall. And now, they saw Travis hacking at the hallway like a deranged miner. "Travis!" my mother screamed, dropping a carton of eggs. "What are you doing to the house?" Travis spun around, the crowbar still in his hand. He looked wild. "Looking for the reserves. Deborah must have reserves. She wouldn't leave a house like this without a contingency fund hidden somewhere." Jessica appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing a silk robe she had stolen from my closet. "What is going on? Why are you screaming?" "Your husband has lost his mind," my father yelled, his face turning red. "Look at this place. It looks like a war zone. Travis, put that thing down." "I need money," Travis roared. "The accounts are frozen. The investors are calling." Jessica ran down the stairs, ignoring the debris. She turned not to Travis, but to my parents, her face twisted into a mask of spoiled indignation. "This is your fault," she shouted at them. "Our fault?" my mother gasped, clutching her chest. "We are buying you groceries, Jessica." "You should have gotten more out of her," Jessica screamed, pointing at the ceiling, referencing me. "You said she was easy. You said she felt guilty about leaving. If you had pushed her for 10,000 instead of 3,000, we wouldn't be in this mess. You are terrible negotiators." "We lied to her for you," my father shouted back. "We stole the deed for you. We are risking jail time, and you are blaming us?" "You didn't steal it fast enough," Jessica countered. "And now Travis is broke because you guys act like peasants. Why didn't you tell me she had fraud protection on her transfers?" I sat in the van, sipping my coffee. It was the most honest conversation they had ever held. They were eating each other alive. The veneer of family had dissolved, leaving only the raw, ugly mechanics of their parasitism. Travis dropped the crowbar. "Shut up. All of you. Shut up. Arguing doesn't pay the sharks." "Sharks?" my mother whispered. "What sharks?" Travis ignored her. His eyes landed on the dining room, specifically on the sideboards. "The furniture," he said, a light bulb going off in his desperate brain. "It is old. It is heavy. It has to be worth something." "You can't sell the furniture," my father said weaky. "Deborah will notice." "Deborah isn't here," Travis yelled, "and I need cash by noon." He pulled out his phone and opened an app. It was a local peer-to-peer marketplace, but he navigated to the urgent section, the digital equivalent of a fence for stolen goods. He walked over to my dining table. It was a solid mahogany piece from the 1890s, passed down through 3 generations before I bought it at an estate sale and restored it. It was worth $25,000 conservatively. "Antique table and chairs," Travis said as he typed, snapping a blurry photo. "Quick sale. Cash only. $2,000. $2,000? Jessica said, wrinkling her nose. "That is it? That won't even cover my credit card bill." "It covers my legs," Travis snapped. I signaled my team. I had an associate named Elias standing by for exactly this scenario. Elias was a large, imposing man who looked like he bought stolen goods for a living, but in reality, he was a licensed asset recovery specialist I had contracted. I sent Elias a text. "The listing is live. Go, buy it all, receipt required." 10 minutes later, a white box truck pulled into my driveway. I watched on the external cameras as Elias walked to the door. Travis opened it, looking relieved and terrified simultaneously. "You the guy for the table?" Travis asked. "Yeah," Elias grunted. "$2,000, cash." He flashed a roll of $100 bills. Travis's eyes bulged. "Take it," Travis said. "Take the chairs, too, and that cabinet over there. $500 for the cabinet." The cabinet was a French provincial piece worth $4,000. I watched as Elias handed over the cash. But before he loaded a single item, he pulled out a generic-looking receipt book. "I need a signature," Elias said. "Bill of sale. Standard practice so the cops don't think I stole it." "Fine, whatever," Travis said. He scribbled his signature. That piece of paper was the final nail. Travis had just sold property he did not own, which he had no legal right to sell, and he had signed a document confirming the transaction. It was theft. It was trafficking in stolen property. Elias and his helper loaded the furniture into the truck. They treated it with surprising care, wrapping each piece in heavy blankets, per my instructions, before driving it away to a storage unit I had rented under a shell company. Travis held the cash in his hands. He immediately peeled off a few bills and shoved them into his pocket, then turned to my parents. "See?" he said, his bravado returning instantly. "Problem solved. I am a businessman. I liquidate assets when necessary." "You just sold your sister's dining room," my mother said, looking at the empty space. "It looks so empty." "It looks modern," Jessica said, shrugging. "Minimalist. I like it. Makes the room feel bigger for my yoga videos." But the $2,500 was not enough to solve their problems. It only bought them another day. And Jessica, sensing the instability, decided to open a second front. She went upstairs to the master bedroom, my bedroom, and set up her ring light. She put on a heavy layer of makeup designed to look like she was not wearing makeup. She tousled her hair to look distressed. She started a live stream. I opened the social media app on my tablet in the van. "Hey guys," Jessica said to the camera, her voice trembling with practiced fragility. Tears welled up in her eyes on cue. "I don't usually do this. I try to be so strong, but today is just too much." Comments started rolling in. "What's wrong? Babe, we are here for you." "It is my family," Jessica sobbed, wiping a tear. "Specifically my sister. You guys know the one, the big shot, working for the government. Well, she owns this house we are staying in. We are just trying to get back on our feet, you know? Travis is working so hard on his startup, but she abandoned us." She paused for effect. "She cut off the power to the nursery." Jessica lied. There was no nursery. "She froze our bank accounts because she knows people in high places. She wants to see us fail. She is jealous of our happiness. She has this huge mansion, and she won't even help us with groceries. We are literally starving in a golden cage." The comments turned vicious. "What a monster. Report her. Drop her Venmo. We got you." "If anyone can spare a few dollars," Jessica whispered, "just so I can feed the dogs. They are innocent in this." It was a masterclass in manipulation. She was monetizing her own treachery. I looked at the donation counter. People were sending $5, $10, sympathy money from strangers who had no idea they were funding a criminal enterprise. I decided to join the conversation. I created a burner account with a generic name, Justice_Seeker_99. I navigated to the donation button. I typed in a number. $5,000. It was a significant amount, enough to make her stop crying instantly. I hit send. On the screen, Jessica's phone pinged with the massive donation alert. Her eyes went wide. The tears vanished instantly. She gasped. "Oh my God!" she screamed. "Someone just sent, oh my God, $5,000. User Justice Seeker, thank you. You are an angel. You literally saved us." She was beaming. The sadness was gone, replaced by the greedy dopamine hit of free money. Then, she read the message attached to the donation. "They sent a note," Jessica said, leaning into the camera. "The truth will set you free." Wow, that is so deep. Thank you. Justice Seeker. The truth really is important. She had no idea. She thought it was a blessing. She thought she had found a new benefactor. She did not realize that by accepting that money, she had just tied herself to a financial transaction that could be traced back to me, but not in the way she thought. I had used a traceable digital token. When she withdrew that money, I would have the location, the time, and the bank account details confirmed one last time before the final strike. More importantly, the message was a countdown. I closed the tablet. The sun was setting over Oak Creek. The house was half empty. The walls were smashed. And the occupants were clutching stolen cash and internet donations. Thinking they had survived the storm, they did not know that the eye of the hurricane had just passed over them. The trailing wall of the storm was coming, and it was bringing the sheriff, the military police, and a reckoning that no amount of crying on a live stream could stop. I started the engine of the van. It was time to change into my costume for the final act. The invitation arrived in my inbox at 3 p.m, forwarded by Mrs. Gable, the president of the local historical society. The subject line read, "Gala for Our Heroes," hosted by Lieutenant Commander, retired, Travis Miller. I stared at the screen in my darkened rental apartment. The audacity was no longer just a character flaw. It was a tumor that had metastasized into a public spectacle. The digital invitation featured a stock photo of an American flag waving against a sunset, overlaid with gold calligraphy that looked suspiciously like the font used on wedding invitations. "Join us for an evening of elegance and giving." It read, "Support the Vets for Vitality Foundation," hosted at the historic Weatherby Estate. They were not just squatting in my house anymore, they were rebranding it. They were using my family name, the name I had built into a symbol of competence and integrity, to wash money for a fake charity. I picked up the phone. It was time to activate the nuclear option. My first call was to Sheriff Brody. We had gone to high school together. He was a good man who hated two things: paperwork and liars. "Deborah?" His voice rumbled. "I thought you were in Alaska. I was about to RSVP to this gala thing at your place. Didn't know you were back in town." "I am not back in town. Officially," I said, keeping my voice low. "And Brody, that gala is a crime scene in progress." I spent the next 20 minutes outlining the situation. I sent him the files, the fraudulent business registration, the stolen valor video clips, the illegal structural modifications, and the evidence of wire fraud. "He is wearing your uniform?" Brody asked, his voice dropping an octave. That was the trigger. In a military town, that is not a misdemeanor. It is a declaration of war. "He is," I confirmed, "and he is soliciting donations from civilians under false pretenses. That makes it a felony fraud scheme. I need you there. Brody, but not yet. I need you to wait until the money changes hands. I need the crime to be consummated in front of witnesses." "I will have a unit down the road," Brody promised. "And Deborah, I am bringing the NCIS liaison from the base. If he is impersonating an officer, the feds want a piece of him too." "Good," I said. "Make sure they bring handcuffs. Plural." My next few hours were spent in a frenzy of administrative violence. I did not pack a weapon. I packed paper. I printed out every single document I had collected over the last 2 weeks. The foreclosure notice for their condo, the bank statements showing the crypto mining expenses, the transcripts of Jessica's livestream lies, the receipt for my sold dining room table, the structural engineering report declaring the house unsafe. I organized them into dossiers. I bound them in bright red folders. I made 10 copies. One for the sheriff, one for the NCIS agent, one for the insurance adjuster, and one for each member of my family. I dressed for the occasion. I did not wear my uniform. That would have been too theatrical. And frankly, Travis had already soiled the image of the Navy enough for one night. I chose a black tailored suit, sharp enough to cut glass, and stilettos that clicked like the hammer of a gun. I drove the rental car to Oak Creek, parking 3 blocks away in a shadow. I walked the rest of the distance. The scene at my house was a grotesque parody of high society. Travis had hired a third-rate event company to set up a stage directly on top of my lawn. The grass, already damaged by the tree removal, was now being suffocated under plywood platforms and cheap red carpeting. String lights were draped hazardously across the remaining trees, powered by extension cords that snaked through the wet grass, an electrocution waiting to happen. I stood in the darkness of the neighbor's hedge, watching. Cars were arriving, nice cars, Mercedes, Lexuses, a few vintage Jaguars. These were my neighbors. These were the local business owners, people I respected, people who thought they were coming to support a noble cause hosted by a local hero. And there was Travis. I felt bile rise in my throat. He was standing at the entrance, greeting guests. He was wearing my dress blues, but he had altered them. The jacket, which had been too tight for his soft, unconditioned frame, had been let out. I could see the fresh stitching on the side seams where a tailor had inserted matching fabric to accommodate his gut. He was wearing my ribbons, but they were in the wrong order. He had placed the National Defense Service Medal above the Meritorious Service Medal. It was a subtle error that a civilian would miss, but to any veteran, it was a screaming insult. He was laughing, shaking hands, patting men on the back with the camaraderie of a soldier he had never been. "Welcome, welcome," I heard him boom. "Yes, the Foundation is doing great work. We are focusing on holistic recovery for the boys overseas." "Holistic recovery," I muttered. "Meaning pyramid scheme supplements." My parents were standing right behind him. They looked like royalty. My father was wearing a tuxedo that he must have rented, and my mother was draped in a sequined gown that caught the light of the cheap strobes. They were beaming. "Yes, this is our son-in-law," my mother was saying to Mrs. Gable. "He is so modest. He does not like to talk about his medals. But we are just so proud. And Jessica? Oh, she organized all of this. She is a natural philanthropist." "And Deborah?" Mrs. Gable asked. "Is she here? It is her house, after all." My mother's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then recovered with practiced ease. "Oh, poor Deborah. She is still stuck up north. You know how she is. Married to the job. She really does not have the social grace for events like this. She prefers her spreadsheets." I gripped the red folders in my hand. Married to the job. No social grace. They were not just stealing my house. They were stealing my narrative. They were painting me as the cold, distant spinster while they played the warm, benevolent patriarchs of a stolen estate. Jessica was flitting around the garden, holding a glass of champagne. She was wearing a dress that looked suspiciously like one I had left in my closet, a designer piece I had bought in Paris. She had shortened the hemline with safety pins. "Make sure you scan the QR code," Jessica was chirping to a group of guests. "Direct donations get a free bottle of Alpha Brain Mist." It was a circus, a flea market masquerading as a gala. I checked my watch. 8:15. The speeches were scheduled for 8:30. That was when the ask would happen. That was when the fraud would cross the line from preparation to execution. I pulled out my phone. I dialed my father's number one last time. I saw him on the lawn. He felt the vibration. He looked at the screen, saw my name, and frowned. He hit the decline button and shoved the phone back into his pocket, turning back to laugh at a joke from the mayor. He ignored me. He ignored the daughter who paid the mortgage so he could play the aristocrat. I opened my text messages. I typed a single line. "Dad, the most important meeting of your life is about to start." I hit send. I saw him check the phone again. He read the message. He looked around, confused, scanning the darkness beyond the lights. For a second, our eyes almost met across the lawn. But I was too deep in the shadows. He shrugged, likely dismissing it as a vague threat from a powerless daughter thousands of miles away. He whispered something to my mother. She rolled her eyes and patted his arm. "Don't worry about her," her body language said. "She is just jealous." The music swelled. A cheesy, patriotic fanfare played over the rented speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen," a DJ announced, "please take your seats. It is time to welcome our host, the hero of the hour, Lieutenant Commander Travis Miller." Applause rippled through the crowd. My neighbors clapped. My friends clapped. They had been duped. They thought they were applauding service. They were applauding a thief in a tailored costume. Travis walked onto the stage. He adjusted the microphone, looking out at the crowd with a look of smug satisfaction that made my blood run cold. "Thank you," he said, affecting a humble, raspy voice. "Thank you all. You know, when I was in the sandbox." He paused for effect, wiping a fake tear. "We didn't have nights like this. We only had each other, and that is why I started Vets for Vitality, because no soldier should have to fight alone." I stepped out of the shadows. I did not run. I did not shout. I walked. I walked with the cadence of a woman who has marched 20 miles with a rucksack. I walked past the valet stand. I walked past the catering table where they were serving cheap shrimp on my fine china. I walked toward the stage. The security guard, a college kid in a yellow windbreaker, tried to step in front of me. "Ma'am, do you have a ticket?" he asked. I stopped. I looked at him. I did not blink. "I am the owner of the property," I said, my voice cutting through the ambient noise like a razor blade. "And I am here to evict the trash." The kid froze. He saw the look in my eyes. He stepped aside. I continued walking. Travis was deep in his lie now. "And that is why I am asking, no, I am ordering you to open your hearts and your wallets tonight. For $5,000, you can become a Platinum Patriot." I reached the edge of the stage. The crowd was starting to notice me. Heads were turning. A ripple of whispers began to spread from the back rows to the front. "Who is that? Is that Deborah? She looks different." My mother saw me first. She dropped her glass. It shattered on the patio stones, the sound sharp and jarring. "Deborah?" she gasped. My father turned. His face went white. He looked from me to the stage, and the realization hit him like a physical blow. Travis, blinded by the stage lights, could not see the audience clearly. He kept talking. "So please, give generously, for the troops." I climbed the stairs to the stage. The wood creaked under my heels. Travis heard the sound. He turned around. He saw me. He saw the sister-in-law he thought was frozen in Alaska. He saw the woman whose house he had destroyed. He saw the real owner of the uniform he was wearing. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The microphone picked up his terrified intake of breath. "Travis," I said. I did not use the microphone, but my voice carried. "You have something of mine." "Debbie?" he squeaked. We thought." "You thought wrong," I said. I stepped into the light. The crowd went silent. The music stopped. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, turning to face the audience. My voice was calm, authoritative. "I apologize for the interruption, but there has been a mistake in the program." I looked at Travis. I looked at the stolen medals on his chest. "The man standing before you has never served a day in his life," I announced. "The uniform he is wearing belongs to me. The house you are standing in belongs to me. And the charity he is soliciting for? It does not exist." A gasp went through the crowd. "This is a lie!" Jessica screamed from the front row. She rushed toward the stage, her face twisted in panic. "She is crazy! She is off her meds. Don't listen to her." "I have the documents," I said, lifting the red folders. "I have the service records. I have the bank transfers. And I have the police," as if on cue. The red and blue lights of 3 cruisers lit up the driveway behind the audience. The heavy thud of car doors closing echoed in the silence. Sheriff Brody walked onto the lawn, flanked by 2 military police officers and an NCIS special agent in a windbreaker. Travis looked at the cops. He looked at me. He looked at the edge of the stage, calculating a jump. "Don't do it, Travis," I said softly. "You are wearing dress shoes on wet plywood. You will break an ankle before they even tase you." He froze. My father rushed the stage. "Deborah, stop this. Think about the family. Think about our reputation." "I am thinking about the family, Dad," I said, handing him one of the red folders. "That is why I brought receipts." The party was over. The imposter's ball had just become a crime scene, and I was the only one holding the script. The wind had died down, leaving the night air crisp and unnervingly still. From my vantage point in the shadows of the old oak canopy, or rather, where the canopy used to be before Travis murdered the tree, I watched the final act of their tragic play begin. Travis stood center stage. The spotlight was hot and white, blinding him to the darkness beyond the platform, creating a bubble of artificial glory. He was gripping the microphone with both hands, his knuckles white, leaning into the performance of a lifetime. The audience, a sea of well-dressed neighbors and local dignitaries, hung on his every word. They were sipping my vintage wine and swallowing his lies. I listened as he began to speak, and a cold chill that had nothing to do with the Alaskan winter ran down my spine. "It was 2012, Travis said, his voice dropping to a theatrical, gravelly whisper. We were moving supplies through the Coast Guardez Pass. The mountains were closing in on us. The dust was so thick you could taste it. And then, the first RPG hit the lead truck. My breath hitched in my throat. He was not just improvising. He was reciting. I knew that story. I knew the specific terrifying geometry of that mountain pass. I knew the smell of the burning rubber and the sound of the radio chatter dissolving into static. I knew it because I had lived it. And more importantly, I had written it down. It was in my private journal, a leather-bound book I kept locked in my bedside drawer, the drawer he had pried open. Travis was stealing my trauma. He was taking the worst day of my life, a day where I lost 2 good friends and gained a permanent ringing in my left ear, and he was turning it into a sales pitch for a non-existent charity. I pulled my driver out of the burning cab, Travis continued, looking up at the sky as if fighting back tears. And I thought to myself, if I make it home, I am going to dedicate my life to helping others heal. The crowd murmured their appreciation. Someone in the front row sniffled. My mother dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, looking at her son-in-law with a pride she had never once directed at me. It was time. I pulled out my phone. I had already hacked back into the main circuit breaker of the house via the remote server. I had control of every photon of light on the property. Enjoy the spotlight, Travis, I whispered, because it is the last thing you will ever see. I tapped the command. Blackout mode. Instantly, every light in the house went out. The garden lights died. The string lights draped over the trees went dark. The ambient glow from the kitchen windows vanished. The only light remaining was the single high-intensity spotlight focused on Travis, isolating him like a specimen in a jar. The crowd gasped. There was a ripple of confusion. Just a technical glitch, folks, Travis shouted, laughing nervously into the microphone. The power grid can't handle all this patriotism, right? Wrong, I said to myself. I tapped the second command. Behind Travis, I had set up a massive projection screen. It was intended for his slideshow of fake humanitarian missions, but I had swapped the input source. The screen flickered to life, bathing the stage in a harsh, cold blue glow. It was not a picture of a soldier. It was a video, high definition, crystal clear audio. It was footage from the kitchen security camera, recorded just 3 days ago, on the massive screen, towering 10 feet tall over the real Travis, was the digital Travis. He was sitting at the kitchen island, a beer in one hand, laughing with Jessica. The audio blasted through the concert-grade speakers I had reactivated. I am telling you, Jess, these people are goldfish, the video Travis said, his voice booming across the lawn. They see a uniform, and they stop thinking. I could tell them I fought on Mars, and they would write a check. The real Travis on stage froze. He turned around slowly, looking up at his own giant, pixelated face. The video continued. Jessica laughed on screen, counting a stack of cash. My cash. God, Mrs. Gable is the worst. Did you see her crying over your war wound story? What an idiot. I bet we can get another $10,000 out of her for the building fund. Easy, Video Travis scoffed. We will milk this town dry by Christmas. Then we sell the house, dump the old furniture, and move to Cabo. Deborah won't even know what hit her. The silence in the garden was absolute. It was a vacuum. The crickets had stopped. The wind had stopped. 400 people sat frozen in their folding chairs, processing the discrepancy between the hero on stage and the predator on the screen. Mrs. Gable, sitting in the front row, stood up slowly. Her face was a mask of horrified realization. "It is a deep fake," Travis screamed into the microphone, his voice cracking into a high-pitched squeal. "Turn it off! Someone turn it off! It is AI! It is Russian hackers! They are trying to discredit the mission!" He was flailing, waving his arms at the screen, trying to block the image of his own greed with his body. "It is not real!" he yelled, looking at my parents. "Mom! Dad! Tell them it is a trick!" My parents sat like stone statues. My father's mouth was opening and closing, but no sound came out. The illusion was not just cracking, it was shattering into a million jagged pieces. I signaled the gate controller. The heavy iron gates at the end of the driveway began to swing open. They groaned on their hinges, a heavy metallic sound that echoed through the silent garden. All heads turned. They expected the police. They expected a SWAT team. Instead, they got me. I walked through the gates. I had ditched the rental car. I wanted to walk the final 100 yards. I was not wearing my uniform. That would have been redundant. Instead, I wore a bespoke black suit, Italian wool, tailored to within a millimeter of my life. My hair, usually tied back in a severe bun, was cut into a sharp, asymmetrical bob that framed my face like a helmet. I wore no jewelry except for a simple, platinum watch. I walked down the center aisle of the garden. My heels struck the pavement with a rhythmic, deliberate cadence. Click, click, click. The crowd parted for me. They shrank back, sensing a predator in their midst. They did not recognize me. To them, Deborah Weatherby was a ghost, a rumor, a checkbook. They saw a woman who radiated pure, concentrated kinetic energy. I did not look at the guests. I kept my eyes locked on the stage. Travis was squinting against the spotlight. "Who is that? Security? Get her out of here." I reached the steps of the stage. I walked up them slowly. 1, 2, 3. I stepped into the circle of light. Travis backed away, tripping over a cable. He looked at me, really looked at me, and the color drained from his face so fast it looked like he had been bled. "Debbie," he whispered. I did not answer. I reached out and took the microphone from his trembling hand. It was not a request. I simply removed it from his grip as if taking a toy from a toddler. I turned to the audience. I waited 3 seconds. I let the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable, until it was painful. "I apologize for the interruption," I said. My voice was low, smooth, and terrified absolutely no one because of its volume, but because of its temperature. It was 0 degrees Kelvin. "The performance is over. The curtain has fallen." I turned slowly to Travis. He was shaking. He looked like a child caught wearing his father's suit. "You are wearing my dress blues, Travis," I said, my voice amplified across the lawn. "But you missed a detail." I reached out. My hand hovered over his chest. He flinched, thinking I was going to hit him. I flicked the ribbon rack on his chest with my index finger. "The National Defense Service Medal," I said, my voice cutting through the air. "It takes precedence over the Global War on Terrorism Service Medal. You have them reversed. If you are going to steal my valor, try to at least get the order of precedence right. It is disrespectful to the uniform." Travis's face twisted. The humiliation was too much. The adrenaline of the cornered rat took over. "You bitch!" he screamed. "You ruined everything!" He lunged at me. He raised a fist, clumsy and slow, fueled by panic and cheap scotch. I did not flinch. I did not even raise my hands. I knew the distance. I knew the velocity. I knew he was off balance. But before he could reach me, a figure blurred from the side of the stage. It was my father. Robert Weatherby tackled me. He did not tackle Travis. He did not tackle the man assaulting his daughter. He grabbed my arm, spinning me away from Travis. putting his body between me and the criminal. "Deborah, stop," my father hissed, gripping my wrist hard enough to bruise. "Stop this right now. Do not make a scene." I looked at my father. I looked at his hand on my arm. Travis was standing behind him, panting, looking for an exit. "He is attacking me. Dad," I said calmly, "and you are holding me." "He is under a lot of stress," my father whispered furiously, his eyes darting to the shocked crowd. "We can fix this inside. Do not humiliate us in front of the neighbors. Just go inside. We will say it was a misunderstanding. Please, Deborah, be the bigger person." Be the bigger person, the mantra of my life, the code phrase for "let us use you." I looked at my father's eyes. There was no love there. There was only fear. Fear of losing status. Fear of the truth. I ripped my arm out of his grasp. The movement was so sharp, so violent in its precision, that my father stumbled back. "I am done being big," I said. "And I am done being a person to you people." I turned back to the microphone. "I am not making a scene. Robert," I said, addressing him by his first name for the first time in my life. The sound of it made him flinch more than a slap would have. I pointed a single, manicured finger toward the main gates, where the red and blue lights were now strobing against the night sky, finally acknowledging the arrival of the cavalry I had summoned. "I am not making a scene," I repeated, my voice echoing off the facade of my stolen home. "I am taking out the trash," as if on command. The heavy thud of boots hit the pavement. Sheriff Brody and the federal agents swarmed through the gates, their weapons drawn, their voices shouting orders that shattered the last remnants of the party. I stepped back into the shadows of the stage, leaving Travis and my father alone in the spotlight to face the consequences of their reality. The slow motion was over. The impact was here, the garden, which moments ago had been a sanctuary of polite society and clinking champagne glasses, dissolved into a theater of tactical violence. The illusion of the charity gala did not just break, it was detonated by the arrival of the authorities. Sheriff Brody moved with the heavy, inevitable momentum of a man who had seen too much small-town corruption to be impressed by a tuxedo. He was flanked by 2 military police officers whose uniforms were sharp, correct, and terrifyingly real, a stark contrast to the costume draped over Travis's sweating frame. Behind them, the NCIS special agent, a woman with eyes like flint, stepped onto the stage. "Travis Miller," the agent announced, her voice cutting through the panic of the scattering crowd. "I am placing you under arrest for violation of the Stolen Valor Act of 2013, wire fraud, and grand larceny." Travis stood frozen in the spotlight. He looked small. The bravado that had fueled him for weeks, the arrogance that had allowed him to drill holes in my walls and sell my furniture, evaporated instantly. He looked at the handcuffs dangling from the MP's belt, and then he looked at me. "Debbie," he whimpered, his voice barely audible over the sirens wailing from the driveway. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them I am family." "You are not family," I said, my voice flat. "You are a suspect." The MP grabbed Travis's arm. He did not be gentle. He spun Travis around, forcing his chest against the podium where he had just been lying about dead soldiers. The sound of the cuffs ratcheting shut, click, 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 was louder than the sirens to my ears. It was the sound of justice finally snapping its jaws shut. That was when Jessica broke. My sister, who had spent the entire evening preening in my stolen dress and collecting donations for a fake cause, realized the net was closing. She did what she has always done since we were children. She pivoted. She cast herself as the victim. "I didn't know!" Jessica screamed. Throwing her hands up as a deputy approached her, she backed away from Travis as if he were radioactive. "I swear I didn't know. He lied to me too. He told me he was a veteran. He told me the house was his. I am a victim here. I am just a wife who trusted her husband." She burst into tears. It was a good performance. Tears streamed down her face, ruining her makeup, making her look tragic and fragile. "He forced me," she sobbed, looking at the crowd of horrified neighbors. "He made me sign those papers. I was afraid of him." Travis twisted his head around, his face contorted with betrayal. "What? You helped me write the script. You picked out the uniform." "Liar!" Jessica shrieked. "You sick liar!" I watched them turn on each other. It was predictable. Parasites always consume each other when the host body fights back. But I was not going to let Jessica rewrite history. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I had one more clip queued up. "Officer," I said to the deputy who was hesitating, looking at the weeping woman with sympathy, "before you take her statement, you should hear this." I tapped the screen. The audio played over the main speakers, which were still active. The voice was unmistakable. It was Jessica's voice, recorded in the kitchen 4 days ago. "Travis, baby, listen to me." The recording played. "If we are short on the loan payment, just go into Mom's jewelry box. She has that sapphire ring from Grandma. She never wears it. We can pawn it in Denver and tell her she lost it. She is getting senile anyway. She will believe it." The crowd gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the garden. My mother, standing near the buffet table, went rigid. Her hand flew to her throat. She looked at Jessica, her golden child, her princess, with an expression of total, shattering shock. Jessica stopped crying instantly. She stared at the speakers, her mouth open, the lie dying in her throat. "That is out of context," Jessica stammered, but her voice lacked conviction. "It sounds pretty clear to me," Sheriff Brody said. "Jessica Miller, you are being detained for questioning regarding conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse. Let's go." "No!" Jessica screamed as the deputy took her arm. "Mom! Daddy! Do something! They are hurting me!" This was the moment where a normal parent would step back. This was the moment where a rational human being would realize their child was a criminal. But my parents were not rational. They were enablers. They were addicts. And their drug of choice was the delusion that they were a perfect, successful family. My father, Robert, rushed forward. He did not run to me. He ran to the sheriff. "Now hold on, Brody," my father shouted, his face purple with exertion. "You can't do this. You are making a mistake. Travis is a businessman. He is the pillar of this family. He is the breadwinner." "He is unemployed, Bob," Brody said, not breaking stride. "And he just stole 100 grand from a loan shark using your daughter's house as collateral." "We can work this out," my mother pleaded, grabbing the NCIS agent's sleeve. "Please, he has a future. If you arrest him, you will ruin his career. Just let us pay the money back. We will find the money. Deborah, tell them to stop. Tell them you drop the charges." They turned to me, both of them. Their eyes were wide, desperate, and filled with a frantic expectation that I would do what I always did, that I would fix it, that I would write the check, bury the body, and let them go back to pretending everything was fine. "I can't drop the charges, Mother," I said, standing on the edge of the stage, looking down at them. "The United States government is the plaintiff now. I am just the witness." "You did this," my father spat, his fingers shaking as he pointed at me. "You called them. You set this up. You trapped him." "I didn't trap him," I replied. "I just turned on the lights." Before he could respond, a heavy, grinding noise echoed from the house. It sounded like the groan of a dying beast. A man in a yellow helmet and a heavy turnout coat walked out of the front door. It was the fire marshal. He was holding a large, neon orange sticker. "Who is the owner of this structure?" the marshal bellowed. "I am," I said. "And I am," Travis shouted from the back of the patrol car where they were shoving him. "Well, whoever it is," the marshal said, ignoring Travis. "This building is hereby condemned. Immediate evacuation order. We found a severed main support beam in the living room and unauthorized load-bearing modifications. The second floor is currently held up by temporary jacks that are buckling. The structure is critically unstable. He slapped the orange sticker onto the front door. It read, "Unsafe. Do not enter. By order of the city." "Condemned?" my mother whispered. "But where will we sleep?" "Not here," the marshal said. "Everyone out. Now. The vibration from this party alone could bring the roof down." The chaos intensified. The guests, who had been watching the arrest with morbid fascination, now realized they were standing in the shadow of a collapsing building. Panic set in. "My donation!" a man in a tuxedo shouted, rushing toward the police car. "I gave that crook $500 cash. I want it back." "He took my credit card number," another woman yelled. "He swiped it on his phone. Officer, stop him." The crowd surged toward the driveway. They were angry. They were embarrassed. They had been duped by a con artist in a stolen uniform. And now they wanted blood. The police had to form a line to keep the mob away from Travis. I watched as they dragged him toward the cruiser. It was the ultimate humiliation. His uniform, my uniform, was disheveled. The jacket was pulled half off his shoulder. The medals were dangling at odd angles. His hat had fallen off, landing in the mud. He was not walking tall. He was stumbling, weeping, begging the officers to be careful with his wrists. "I am a veteran," Travis wailed, still clinging to the lie even as the handcuffs bit into his skin. "You should treat me with respect." "Shut up, son," the MP growled, shoving him into the back seat. "You are a disgrace." Jessica was being led to a separate car. She was not in cuffs yet, but she looked defeated. She saw the neighbors, people she had tried to impress, people she had sneered at, staring at her with pure disgust. She lowered her head, hiding her face with her hair, unable to meet the gaze of the community she had tried to defraud. The driveway cleared. The sirens faded as the cruisers drove away, taking the cancer of my family with them. The fire marshal began herding the last of the guests out of the gates. "Move it, Bauer. Folks, zone is red. Clear the area." My parents stood on the lawn. They looked at the orange sticker on the door. They looked at the muddy footprints on the red carpet. They looked at the empty stage. I walked down the steps. I stood in front of them. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. I expected an apology. I expected them to say, "My God, Deborah, we didn't know." I expected them to say, "Thank you for saving the house from falling down." But I had forgotten who I was dealing with. My father looked at me. His face was not filled with shame. It was filled with a cold, hard fury. "Are you happy now?" he whispered. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Are you happy?" my mother hissed, stepping forward. Her face was twisted into a snarl I had never seen before. "You humiliated him. You humiliated us. In front of the whole town. In front of Mrs. Gable. He was stealing from you." "Mother," I said, my voice trembling slightly for the first time that night. "He was going to pawn your ring. He destroyed my house. He committed a felony." "We could have handled it privately," my father shouted. "We are family. You don't call the police on family. You don't ruin a young man's life over money." "It wasn't about money," I said. "It was about honor. It was about the uniform he was wearing. My uniform." "Oh, your precious uniform," my mother spat. "You always cared more about that stupid uniform than you did about your sister. You always had to be the special one, the hero. And now look, you destroyed her life just to prove a point." She gestured at the condemned house. "Look at this place," she said. "It is a ruin, and it is your fault. If you had just let them stay, if you had just helped them a little more, Travis wouldn't have had to do those desperate things. You pushed him to this." I stared at them. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. They were not victims of Travis's con. They were co-conspirators in his entitlement. They did not hate the sin. They hated the person who turned on the light. They would rather have been robbed blind by a charming liar than saved by a truth-telling daughter. "I didn't push him," I said quietly. "I just stopped catching him when he fell." "You are cold, Deborah," my father said. turning his back on me. "You have ice in your veins. I don't know how we raised a daughter like you." "You didn't," I said to his back. "I raised myself." The fire marshal walked over. "Ma'am, I need you to vacate the property. We are sealing the site." "I am leaving," I said. I looked at my parents one last time. They were standing by their car, arguing about who was going to call the bail bondsman. They looked old. They looked small. And for the first time in my life, I felt absolutely nothing for them. No anger, no sadness, just the hollow indifference one feels for strangers in a crowd. I turned and walked toward the gate. The house of cards had fallen, and I was the only one left standing in the wind. The conference room in Evelyn Sterling's law office was a study in intimidation. It was situated on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in Denver, offering a panoramic view of the mountains that my family had just tried to steal from me. The table was a slab of gray marble, cold to the touch and impossible to dent. I sat at the head of it, my hands folded on top of a single, thick file folder. I had been waiting for 10 minutes. Evelyn sat to my right, silent and sharp as a scalpel, scrolling through her tablet. We did not speak. There was nothing left to strategize. The trap had been sprung. This was merely the skinning of the prey. The door opened. The receptionist did not announce them. She simply held the door and stepped back with a look of professional pity. My parents walked in first. Robert and Linda Weatherby looked 10 years older than they had 48 hours ago. My father's shoulders, usually squared with unearned confidence, were slumped. My mother was wearing sunglasses indoors, likely to hide swollen eyes, but the tremor in her hands was visible even from across the room. And then there was Jessica. She had made bail that morning. She looked like a ghost of the girl who had preened on my stage. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, and she was wearing a gray tracksuit that hung loosely on her frame. She did not look at me. She stared at the carpet, radiating a mix of sullen resentment and terrified exhaustion. They sat on the opposite side of the marble slab. The distance between us was only 4 feet, but it felt like a canyon. "Thank you for seeing us." "Deborah," my father started. His voice was raspy. He tried to summon his old authoritative tone, the one he used to command me to clean my room or loan him money. But it cracked. "We need to resolve this whole nightmare." "It is not a nightmare, Robert," I said, keeping my voice level. "It is a legal proceeding, and I am seeing you because my attorney advised me to offer you a settlement before the grand jury convenes next week." "Settlement?" Jessica's head snapped up. Hope flared in her eyes, that toxic, entitled hope. "So you are dropping the charges? You are going to tell them it was a mistake?" "We know you were angry, honey," my mother chimed in, leaning forward. She reached across the table as if to touch my hand, but stopped when she saw the look in my eyes. "And you had every right to be upset. The party was too much. We admit that. But Travis is sitting in a county jail cell right now. He is terrified. He has family. You can't let him rot in there." "He needs bail money," my father said, cutting to the chase. $50,000. We don't have it. You know we don't have it. We need you to post it. Deborah, and we need you to sign an affidavit of non-prosecution. If you tell the district attorney you gave him permission to use the house, the fraud charges go away. We can say the military thing was just a costume party misunderstanding." I looked at them. I really looked at them. They were asking me to commit perjury. They were asking me to pay $50,000 to free the man who had destroyed my home and mocked my service. And they were asking it with the expectation that I would say yes, because for 34 years, I had always said yes. "You want me to lie to federal agents," I said, "and you want me to pay for the privilege. We want you to save your family." My father slammed his hand on the table. "God damn it. Deborah, family is everything. You don't destroy your own blood. Jessica is your sister. Travis is her husband. He made a mistake. He is young. He is dumb. But he doesn't deserve prison." "She is still foolish," my mother whispered. using a phrase she always used when we were children. She didn't know, Deborah. She just went along with him. I opened the file folder in front of me. I pulled out a single sheet of paper, a spreadsheet I had compiled with the forensic accountant. $450,000, I said. The room went silent. What? My father asked. That is the number, I said. That is the cost of your family is everything philosophy. Let us break it down. $150,000 for the fraudulent loan you helped facilitate. $75,000 in structural damage to the house, including the main support beam Travis sawed through. $25,000 in stolen antique furniture sold for cash. $15,000 in electricity for the crypto mining. And roughly $185,000 in legal fees, security costs, and the expedited restoration work I now have to commission to keep the city from bulldozing my home. I slid the paper across the marble. $450,000, I repeated. That is the tangible cost. The intangible cost? My reputation in the community? My standing with the military? That is incalculable. You put a price tag on my life, and you sold it for pennies. My father looked at the paper. He did not touch it. We can pay you back, over time, once Travis gets his business going. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Travis does not have a business. Dad, he has a pyramid scheme and a gambling addiction, and you know it. So what do you want? Jessica spat, her voice shrill. You want blood? You want to see us on the street? Is that it? You are the rich sister. You have everything. Why are you so stingy? Stingy? I looked at her. I paid for your college. I paid for your car. I paid for your wedding. I have been paying for your life since I was 22 years old. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the gray skyline. I needed to say this. I needed to cut the cord. And I knew it would hurt me more than it hurt them. Because I was the only one in the room who actually felt the loss of what could have been. I figured it out, I said, turning back to face them. I spent 2 nights in a hotel room wondering why. Why did you let them do it? Why did you give them the key? Why did you steal the deed from my safe? We didn't steal it, my mother sobbed. We just borrowed it. Stop, I commanded. I figured it out. You don't love Jessica. Jessica blinked, confused. What? You don't love her, I said to my parents. You love her failure. You love her helplessness. Because as long as she is a mess, she needs you. As long as she is broken, you get to play the saviors. You get to feel important. You get to be the good parents who are sacrificing everything for their poor, struggling child. I looked at my mother. And you don't love me either. You love my checkbook. You love that I am competent enough to fund your savior complex. But you resent me for it. You resent that I don't need you. My independence is an insult to you. So you punish me for it. You let them trash my house because, deep down, you felt I deserved to be taken down a peg. You wanted to see me bleed so you could feel superior. The silence in the room was heavy, thick with the ugly truth I had just placed on the table. That is a lie, my father whispered, but his eyes could not meet mine. That is a sick, twisted lie. Is it? I asked. Then why did you steal my deed? Why did you watch Travis wear my uniform and say nothing? Because you liked it. You liked seeing him play the hero because it made you feel like you were part of something special. Even if it was a fraud. You preferred a fake hero who needed you to a real one who didn't. I sat back down. I signaled Evelyn. Evelyn pulled a thick document from her briefcase. She placed it in the center of the table. This is a partition agreement, Evelyn said, her voice cool and professional, and a quitclaim deed, and a permanent restraining order. What is this? My father asked, eyeing the document suspiciously. It is my offer, I said. Here is how this ends. You, Robert and Linda Weatherby, are currently facing charges of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and grand larceny. We have the video of you handing over the keys. We have the forensic evidence of your fingerprints on the safe where the deed was kept. We have the text messages. I can send you to federal prison for 5 to 10 years. My mother let out a strangled cry. My father went pale. However, I continued, I am willing to drop the civil suit against you personally, and I will decline to press charges for the theft of the deed. I will characterize your involvement as under duress to the district attorney. Okay. My father exhaled, looking relieved. Okay, good. We accept. There is a condition, I said. I pointed to the document. You will sign this. It states that you are voluntarily removing yourselves from my life. You surrender any and all claims to my estate, present and future. You acknowledge that you have received your full inheritance in the form of the financial support I have provided over the last decade. You agree to a permanent restraining order that bars you from coming within 500 feet of me or my property, and you agree to never contact me again. No phone calls, no emails, no Christmas cards. You are disowning us? My mother gasped. I am emancipating myself, I corrected. I am firing you as my parents. And what about Travis? Jessica asked, her voice trembling. What about the bail money? There is no bail money, I said cold. Travis stays in jail. And Jessica? You are not part of this deal. Jessica's eyes widened. What? You are the primary co-conspirator, I said. You signed the loan documents. You spent the money. You impersonated me on the phone with the utility company. You are going to trial. Mom! Jessica screamed, grabbing my mother's arm. Mom, don't let her do this. She is going to send me to prison. She is right, Deborah, my father said. Finding his anger again, he stood up, his face red. We can't sign this. We can't abandon Jessica, and we won't let you treat us like this. I am your father. I gave you life. You ungrateful, cold-hearted bitch. You think your money makes you God? You are nothing without us. I am everything without you, I said. I am safe without you. I am solvent without you. I won't sign it, my father spat. I will see you in court. No jury will convict parents for trying to help their children. Evelyn, I said. Evelyn picked up a remote control and pointed it at the wall-mounted television screen. The screen flickered to life. It was a video from the security camera in my parents' own kitchen. How? My father stammered. I installed it 3 years ago when you said you were worried about break-ins, I said. You forgot it was there. This is from the night before the party. The video played. My father was sitting at the table with Travis. If Deborah finds out, we are screwed, Travis said on the video. She won't find out, my father's voice replied, clear and crisp. And even if she does, she is weak. She craves our approval. I will just tell her we did it for the family. I will cry a little. Your mother will hold her hand. She will write a check. She always does. She is a cash cow. Travis, we just have to keep milking her. She is a cash cow. The words hung in the air of the conference room. I paused the video. That, I said, pointing to the screen, is what the jury will see. They will not see loving parents. They will see predators. They will see a conspiracy to exploit a veteran. I leaned forward. Look at the camera in the corner of this room. Dad, I said, pointing to the ceiling. We are recording right now. This is your one chance. You sign that paper. You walk out of here. And you stay out of prison. You keep your pension. You keep your freedom. But you lose me. Forever. Or, I continued, you refuse, and I hand that video to the DA this afternoon, and you and Mom spend your golden years in a federal penitentiary cell, right next to Travis. My father looked at the screen. He looked at the document. He looked at Jessica, who was weeping silently, realizing she was drowning and there was no life raft. He looked at my mother. She nodded, a small, defeated movement. He picked up the pen. You are killing this family, he whispered. The family was dead the moment you called me a cash cow. I said. He signed. His hand shook so badly the signature was barely legible. A jagged scrawl of defeat. He passed the pen to my mother. She signed. tears dropping onto the paper, leaving wet spots on the legal disclaimer. They did not look at Jessica. They could not. They were saving themselves. Just as I had predicted. "Get out," I said. They stood up. My mother tried to look at me one last time, perhaps to offer a final manipulative look of sorrow, but I was already looking at my file. They walked out the door. Jessica sat there alone. The silence was absolute. "They left me," she whispered. "They actually left me." "They were always going to leave you." "Jess," I said, closing the file. "The moment it got too expensive to keep you, they cut their losses. I learned that lesson a long time ago. Welcome to the real world." I stood up and nodded to Evelyn. "Call the DA," I said. "Tell him the parents are cooperating, and tell him I am ready to testify against the sister." I walked out of the room, leaving Jessica alone with the consequences of her life. I walked to the elevator, and for the first time in 2 weeks, the crushing weight on my chest was gone. It cost me $450,000 and 3 blood relatives to buy my freedom. It was a bargain. 6 months have passed since the flashing lights of the police cruisers faded from my driveway, leaving behind a silence that was heavy not with emptiness, but with possibility. The legal machinery, usually a grindingly slow beast, moved with surprising speed when fueled by the undeniable evidence of federal crimes. Travis is currently residing in the Federal Correctional Institution in Englewood. He took a plea deal to avoid the maximum sentence for wire fraud and stolen valor. He is serving 5 years. I did not go to the sentencing hearing. I did not need to see him in an orange jumpsuit to know that justice had been served. I read the transcript sent by the court clerk while drinking my morning coffee. Apparently, he cried when the gavel came down. He blamed society. He blamed the pressure of expectations. He blamed everyone but the man in the mirror. Jessica did not go to prison, but she is serving a sentence of her own making. The court ordered restitution, which meant the liquidation of their assets. The condo in Denver was sold. The luxury SUV was repossessed. Her designer wardrobe, or at least the parts she had not ruined, ended up on resale websites. She is now living with our parents in a rented 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city, near the industrial park. I imagine the 4 of them in that cramped space. My parents, sleeping on a mattress that is not quite firm enough for their backs, listening to Jessica complain about the lack of closet space. All of them united in their shared misery and their collective narrative that I am the villain who ruined their lives. They are a closed ecosystem of bitterness now, feeding off each other's resentment. It is a punishment far more effective than any jail cell I could have constructed for them. As for the house in Oak Creek, it has undergone a metamorphosis. When the fire marshal removed the condemnation sticker, I stood in the living room and looked at the damage. The support beam Travis had severed was a jagged wound in the heart of the home. My first instinct, the instinct of the preservationist I used to be, was to restore it exactly as it was, to find a matching piece of century-old oak, to hire artisans to replicate the plaster molding, to erase the scar and pretend the injury never happened. But then I realized that erased scars are just lies we tell ourselves about our history. I did not want to pretend anymore. I hired an architect from Seattle who specializes in brutalist warmth. We did not put the wall back. Instead, we installed a permanent, exposed steel I-beam to support the second floor. It is painted a matte black, stark and unyielding against the soft white of the surrounding walls. It stands there in the middle of the room, not as a repair, but as a statement. It says, "This structure was broken, and it was rebuilt stronger than before." I ripped out the carpets. I tore down the floral wallpaper that my mother had always complimented. I sold every single piece of furniture that was in the house during the occupation. The dining table my father had sat at, the sofa Jessica had lounged on, the bed where they had slept. I sold it all to an estate liquidator for a lump sum. I did not care about the price. I just wanted their energy gone. I wanted to exorcise the ghosts of their entitlement from my sanctuary. My home is now a fortress of modern comfort. The floors are polished concrete, heated from beneath, The furniture is low profile, Italian leather, and sharp angles. It is a space that demands respect. It is a space that does not apologize for its existence. But I did not just rebuild my house. I rebuilt my purpose. The experience of being targeted because of my deployment gave me a clarity I had not expected. I realized that I was not unique. There are thousands of service members currently deployed in forward operating bases, sitting in deserts and jungles, trusting their families back home with their power of attorney and their bank accounts, and many of them are being bled dry by the very people they are fighting to protect. So, I founded the Hearthkeeper. It is a nonprofit organization, headquartered in a small office downtown, funded initially by the damages I recovered from the lawsuit and sustained by my own salary. We provide forensic accounting and legal asset protection for active duty military personnel. We review bank statements for deployed soldiers. We set up trust structures that prevent unauthorized withdrawals. We act as the bad guys, so the soldiers don't have to fight their families while fighting a war. Evelyn Sterling sits on my board of directors. We have already stopped 3 unauthorized property sales and flagged a dozen cases of identity theft by spouses and siblings. Every time we save a soldier's life savings, I feel a little bit of the weight lift from my own shoulders. I am turning my trauma into armor for others. Last night, I hosted a gathering. I refused to call it a party. It was a dinner. There were no rented stages. There were no microphones. There were no speeches about heroism. There were 6 people at my new dining table, a slab of raw, live-edge walnut that weighs 400 pounds. Evelyn was there, nursing a glass of red wine. David, the structural engineer who saved my house from collapsing, was there with his wife, my commanding officer, who happened to be stateside for a conference, stopped by, and 2 of my neighbors, the ones who had apologized profusely for attending Travis's gala, joined us. The conversation was rich and genuine. We talked about politics, about architecture, about the best way to roast a duck. There was laughter, but it was not the frantic, performing laughter of people trying to impress each other. It was the deep, resonant laughter of people who have nothing to hide. I looked around the table and realized that this was family. Family is not determined by DNA. It is determined by loyalty. It is determined by shared values. It is determined by who shows up when the roof is caving in, literally and metaphorically. This morning, the final ghost arrived. It came in the form of a cream-colored envelope in my mailbox. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was my mother's script, looped and decorative, a relic of a time when appearance was everything. I took the letter inside. I stood in front of my new fireplace, a gas-burning unit framed in slate and steel. I held the envelope up to the light. It was thick. I knew exactly what was inside. It would start with guilt. "We miss you." It would pivot to health issues. "Your father's blood pressure is up." It would mention the difficult living conditions. "The apartment has mold." And then, on the second page, the ask would come. Just a small loan until we get settled. For the sake of the past. My thumb hovered over the flap, a part of me, the part that was 5 years old, and wanted my mother to tell me I was a good girl, wanted to open it. I wanted to read their words. I wanted to see if there was an apology hidden in the ink. But I am not 5 years old. I am 34. I am a lieutenant commander. I am a survivor. I realized that opening the letter was an act of negotiation. It was an admission that there was still a conversation to be had. And there is no conversation. The verdict has been rendered. The sentence has been passed. I did not open the envelope. I tossed it into the fireplace. I watched the flames lick at the cream paper. The fire curled the edges, turning the polite script into black ash. It flared up, bright and hot for a second, and then it was gone. Smoke rose up the chimney, carrying the last of their hold on me into the cold Colorado air. I poured myself a glass of wine, a Pinot Noir from a vineyard in Oregon, and walked out onto the back deck. The sun was setting over the valley. The sky was a bruising mix of purple and gold, casting long shadows across the snow-capped peaks in the distance. The air was cold, biting at my cheeks, but I did not shiver. I felt warm. I sat in the Adirondack chair I had placed exactly where the old oak tree used to stand. I miss that tree, but I have planted 3 saplings in its place. They are small now, fragile things wrapped in burlap to protect them from the frost. But they will grow. They will put down roots in soil that is mine. They will grow straight and tall, because I will tend to them. I will protect them. I took a sip of the wine. It tasted of cherries and earth. I lost a family, I said aloud, my voice swallowed by the vastness of the mountains. But I won back my life. I thought about the cost. $450,000, the loss of a sister, the loss of parents, the destruction of a childhood home. It sounds like a fortune. It sounds like a tragedy. But as I sat there, breathing in the clean, free air, answering to no one, fearing no phone call, dreading no intrusion, I realized the truth. It was cheap, I whispered. It was a bargain. If you are listening to this, and you feel that familiar knot in your stomach when a certain relative calls, if you are hiding your success to avoid their greed, if you are setting yourself on fire to keep them warm, stop. Thank you for listening to my story on BitterSweet Drama Stories. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Whether you are listening from a base in Alaska, a busy city in Vietnam, or anywhere else in this big world. Please leave a comment below to share your thoughts and connect with our community. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and hit the hype button to help these stories reach more people who might need to hear them. Stay strong and protect your peace.